not above 30, so it was above 30. Anyway, welcome to all of you, and thank you for being here today. Thank everyone again for completing the questionnaire. We're glad to have John Sharp and Ken here today and lead this goal setting effort. And I'll call on our county manager, see if she'd like to say anything in intro before we start, and turn it over to her.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and good morning, Commissioner, staff, and guests. I am happy and pleased that Amy Cannon and Jonna Sharp are here today to lead this goal session for us. They do this across the state for other counties, and I thought, especially as my first year, this would be a great opportunity for them to come in and help us on the staff side, as well as you, the commissioners, to really try to figure out what your priorities and goals are, especially as we go into the budget process. We want to make sure it reflects what your priorities are. They pulled this together at the last minute for me, which I greatly appreciate. And typically do this in a day or two sessions. So we have a packed presentation for about 2.5 hours. We'll be respectful of your time, and then at the end we'll talk about next steps. So without further ado, I'm going to turn it over to Amy Cannon and Jonna Sharp.
Good morning. For those of you that I haven't met, I'm Amy Cannon. This is Jonna Sharp. I'm sure many of you are seeing Jonna on a regular basis working with Chantel in the budget process. Thank you for the opportunity to be a part of this session today. We're so excited about the board engaging in developing some goals and priorities, and Chantel said it so eloquently. This is an opportunity to provide staff some feedback as they're working through the budget process. Most goals need money. And so Jonna will have a better idea of how to allocate resources in the recommended budget. The foundation today was set by your feedback, and we are so pleased to let you know that we received 100% participation. So pat yourselves on the back for that, because that does not happen in many of the counties that we work with. That just gives us an idea of how eager you are and ready to set some goals for yourself, for the county, as well as staff. This is your session. We want you to be comfortable. Jonna and I do not have a set structure. In obtaining that feedback, it allows us the opportunity to know how to structure the session that provides the most meaningful information for the board. I don't like being put on the spot, and I'm not going to put you on the spot. If you want to participate and have something to say, that's great, but I'm not going to look to Commissioner McDaniel and say, what do you think about that? And so I want you to be at ease. The best participation is your willingness without being put on the spot. We're going to start with a presentation on foresight by the numbers, some demographic information, economic information, some charts on your tax rate, and that type of thing. Really is the foundation. It helps you to know some summary information in building your goals. And then we're going to get into what the county's core responsibilities are. The staff has been phenomenal in helping us put together this presentation. It was not just John and I. The staff has been extremely responsive and helpful. We're going to talk about the commission, your input that helped build the session today, and then we're going to engage with you about identifying some of your goals and priorities. So on the demographic piece, I just want to give you a little bit of broad information. There's a lot of charts and slides. I'm going to go through them rather quickly and not linger, because we do want to have enough time to talk about 6 focus areas and get your feedback. There's nothing alarming in the numbers that you're going to see today. You still may have questions, and if you do have questions, let us know and we can come back and provide more information if there's something that we can't address. We'll start off by talking about population. And as you can see, your population over the last 30 plus years has almost doubled. In the 1990s, it was just above 200,000, and you're almost at 400,000. So here, we're bringing in some comparison information with the top other 4 counties in the state. You can see that your population has been very stable in comparison to the other counties. A little bit more growth in those very large urban counties, Mecklenburg and Wake. They're on here. There are some similarities between Forsyth and then other areas. The two of them just stand alone. You can see that your growth has been mainly in the municipal areas. Your unincorporated population has actually decreased over that same period of time, or actually from 1970. Specifically, you've gained about 178,000 residents during this time period, and the municipal areas, again, have had the most significant increase of about 137%, with about an 18% decline in the unincorporated areas. This, I'm gonna take a little bit of time to explain this chart, so bear with me. So this chart, I'll move to this side if I can. This chart lays out by age and also by gender, men on this side and females on this side, the level of population by age group. So you can see in the younger years what your population looks like. You have a very, very strong working age base, because you can see it measured on this side over here. On both sides, both male and female. The largest group of men is in your 20s and early 30s, women in the 30 range. And you can see that you taper off about 80 on the aging population. There's really no significant imbalances in this chart and the way your population is laid out by age group. This is a little confusing. Are there any questions about this slide? I'm gonna pop up the state, and that gives you a little bit of comparison. And so on the state side, you can see that there's statewide, your aging population is less. I know in the survey information, there's a lot of discussion about the need for aging services, and you still need aging services, but you don't have the significant aging population as North Carolina. But there's really no significant differences, although the largest female population, instead of yours being in the 30s, is really in the 20s. The male population is about the same, and a little bit more on the youth side for North Carolina. So the median age in Forsyth County is about 38 years old. It's lower than the 86 other counties. So let's dissect this a little bit. On the right side, this would be your retirement communities. This would be the mountains, it would be the coastal areas with a greater aging population. Anything lower, some on the other side, the lower median age would be Onslow County and Cumberland County, those with military bases. Economics and workforce, and so we're comparing here North Carolina averages and Forsyth. You can see that 34% of your residents have a high school degree at most, but you are just absolutely in line with the statewide average. Nothing out of sorts here. Okay. Education attainment. I know each of you are aware of NC Future for North Carolina, and a goal that 2 million by 2030 have some type of high quality credentialed post-secondary degrees. You can see the goal is in blue, and you are right along average for Guilford and really not that far behind Mecklenburg County. Education attainment, remember, and this is going to hold true throughout the presentation, remember Durham is the School of Medicine, and that's going to skew some of the per capita information as well as education attainment. So some of those areas, I'll point those out as we go along. Unemployment. This is a little bit difficult to see, but there's a light lavender line that represents the statewide averages, Forsyth in green, and typically over the years, Forsyth unemployment has been right under the state average, but you follow the exact same trend, and of course you can see the spike in the pandemic. Right now, Forsyth is right in line with the state at just under 4%. At a retreat last week, somebody said, what's the average? And Denise Canada, let me step back. I did not prepare this presentation. We need to give full credit to Denise Canada with the North Carolina Association of County Commissioners. She does a more eloquent job than I do, but Denise said that 5% has kind of been the marker. You don't want to be above 5%, but anything below 5% is expected and normal in times when there's not a recession or anything odd in the economy. So here's an interesting slide to tell you, where do your residents work? And so you can see that 52% of your residents actually work in Forsyth County, and 14% come from your bordering communities, which is probably not surprising. 7% come from the Triangle area, and then 21% from bordering, and then 14% from this lighter blue category. One of the things that maybe is not considered in this is, are they commuting or are they working virtually from home? And Denise is going to try to find a way to kind of refine those numbers. And so some of these that are in these areas, the home office may be in these areas, but they're actually working from home. Economics and workforce, this is probably not going to surprise you. The goods producing economy and jobs and workforce has declined over the last 30 plus years. Significant increase in service producing side. That's where the job growth has been over this period of time. But your jobs and workforce have significantly increased. This is the statewide average. The 22, there's a significant drop off here. That really reflects the significant inflation that we all saw after the pandemic. But the statewide average has increased a little bit more quickly than Forsyth County, but still not alarming. Economics in your workforce, we want to break this down and look at your per capita income. This measures the per capita income from 2019 to 2003. In comparison, Forsyth again has had steady growth, both in your per capita income and your average weekly wage. Here again, you can see Durham is an outlier because of the strong medical foundation, and it's actually higher than Mecklenburg and Wake, but Forsyth exceeds Guilford in both areas, both the per capita income, but also the average weekly wage. So, gross domestic product. I'm going to give you the most simplistic, I'm not an economist, definition is this measures the value of goods and services that are produced in your local economy. And it's actually the net because it subtracts the cost of producing those goods and services. So over here, you can see some significant increases. But if that's the value of the goods and services, the cost of living is also higher over here. So the cost of those goods and services are higher over here, which would show a higher GDP. So as you look at yours it's increased about 5%. And that's strong, and it's actually higher than Guilford. And there are many counties on here. Each bar represents the 100 counties. And so some have actually seen a significant decline in their GDP. And that's the limit of my economic session today. This really dissects what's the composition of your economy. Manufacturing, you're still very strong in the manufacturing area at 27%. And then you go up to services, your medical field, education, hospitality, finance, real estate. And this is probably very synonymous with what you would see, except you're still strong in the manufacturing area. Okay, property taxes. Again, we're going to look at the top 5 counties, including Forsyth. This is measuring the property tax rates. Over here, remember that in a revaluation year, there's probably decreases to some level in the tax rate, which would account for these decreases. Interestingly, Guilford County has stayed very level. So maybe they're on the cusp of a revaluation, or they were actually stayed revenue neutral. And so Forsyth, you can see your property tax rates have been very stable and maintained after a reduction in about FY21. This chart kind of further dissects your valuation and your property tax levy per capita. And so you can see that Forsyth has had a very steady and growing tax base. It's difficult to measure against, again, Wake and Mecklenburg, but you're right in line with Guilford as far as, and property tax levy per capita is your levy divided by your population. And that gives you per person what is your levy. And so you've had some significant continued growth. Guilford may have picked up in the area of population, but this is also your valuation. This is just what the valuation is, but you've continued to have growth, continued growth. You can see a drop off in Guilford, but yours has been, again, steady. So we'll move now to education. And so this is an encouraging slide. Your 3rd grade reading proficiency is very impressive here. You are really almost above Mecklenburg County, and that's something to be extremely proud of from an education point of view. That's impressive. Your graduation rates. This speaks well of your education system. Your graduation rates are higher than Mecklenburg and almost at the Wake level and Guilford. So very, very strong from an education point of view. Teacher supplements. Obviously, this board has been very supportive of teacher supplements because your supplements have increased 90% since 2019. That's very, very strong. And you're at the level of Durham, above Guilford, and not too far away out of the woods of Mecklenburg and Wake. So that's something else that you should, as a board, be very proud of?
I would say for me, that this makes me feel very good. We've put a lot of resources in lots of pockets, and to show me that this is working makes sense. So I appreciate that.
Something
Yeah,
to be proud of.
quarter cent sales tax did that for us.
Okay.
And when the green line went up, it was the first full year.
This really tells a picture. I'm not sure if you were aware of how much it increased.
I wasn't.
Okay,
But
good.
even the other one, the other slide that you had just previously, the education one.
Yes, ma'am.
Yeah, for the third graders, I'm glad to know that because that's been some conversation around proficiency of third graders, and I'm
Thank
glad
your
to see that.
manager asked for these.
These are good.
I'm gonna give her
These are
credit.
good.
I'm not taking credit for
No,
you.
but I'm glad to have the information, so it's good.
And just so you all know, we will do a deeper dive on all things education, and some more data at the winter work session.
Thank you.
So let's talk about human services. In your survey feedback, there was a lot of challenges mentioned in food insecurity as well as poverty. Let me say this, all counties are struggling in these areas. It is not just Forsyth County. And you can see that in these numbers. You can see that the number of children in poverty is still high for all of the counties. Durham, Guilford, and Forsyth. Food insecurity is on the rise for Forsyth in 22. So, and that came out in the survey. But you can see, even Guilford, Mecklenburg, and Wake are struggling with these areas. There have been increases, but you also have to remember during the pandemic, there disaster food stamps. We don't have disaster food stamps anymore. It's not disaster, it was the economic food stamps. I'm not using the right terminology, but enhanced food stamps as a result of the pandemic. Those have been removed, so that may be part of the increase. And there are also, you can see a drop in between 20 and 21 are leveling off, and there was additional subsidies, financial subsidies for those in the human services system. So that's why you see some increases for everyone after the pandemic. Does that make sense?
Do you know the data source, particularly for the food insecurity? I mean, what's I don't know exactly what's tracked.
Yeah, put a plug in.
So it's in the map book. And it probably has a definition, and I have one of those on my desk. So.
Let me look real quick on the food insecurity. It is Feeding America and Mapping the Meal Gap are the sources.
We should probably ask Denise a little bit more about that.
I'm familiar with Feeding America. It's the supplier of a lot of the food bank and backpack program funding.
And the Children in Poverty is from the Census Bureau.
Is from,
Census Bureau.
okay.
Your Medicaid enrollment has increased, but it's increased across the board. Interestingly enough, Guilford's is significant, but again, you can see that Medicaid expansion enrollment. Your numbers, you've had a large number as well as Guilford, but also in Mecklenburg as well. Your uninsured residents, again, you're really not that much different than the other counties. Large number, about 14%, look between 12 and 13%. That's it. I went through that quickly. I had about a 30-minute time limit. I know that was fast. If you have any additional questions, please let us know. We can dive, and again, we're gonna dive deeper into education. But at this point, I'm gonna turn it over to Jonna, and we're gonna start talking about the focus areas. And,
Were there any things that surprised you in those numbers, other than maybe really seeing the 90% growth in the teacher supplement in writing? No? wanna spend some time kind of gearing up to help you maybe identify some goals that you want for this year, for next year. And how we structured each section is we're gonna provide you a summary of your key direct responsibilities, who partners are that work in these focus areas, because, you know, one of the things with counties is you've got municipalities, you've got partners, you can only control so much, so there's a lot that happens by building those partnerships within your community. We're gonna share with you your pre-session input at a high level, so you can see where you all have things in common. And there are lots of commonalities amongst what you all shared. A lot of themes coming out that were similar. And then we'll have some discussion in each section about really trying to focus in on what are some of those priorities or goals that you might want to kind of get down on paper and be more formal in how you might approach those. I always like to start with this. This is probably the only habit I practice routinely of Stephen Covey's 7 Habits of Highly Effective People. But, you know, goals are really about where do you want to go, where do you end up, and that's kind of the commissioner's role, is to decide what we want to be, what does Forsyth want to look like in the future. You're representing the community. This is where you put your leadership thumbprint on the future of Forsyth. And then staff's role is really kind of figuring out the how to get there. So we want to spend time kind of, what do you want Forsyth to be in the future? And here's a summary of your major accomplishments. And there are quite a significant number. And some of the commissioners have very long tenures, and just to identify 3, I know was a challenge for many of you. But these accomplishments didn't happen by accident. You had to have set these as priorities in the future and develop those initiatives, put funding behind it, brought in the partners to make this happen. Everything from, you've mentioned the passing the quarter-cent sales tax, which has really enabled you to increase your funding in education. Overwhelming passage of bond referendums. Not every county can say that. Major accomplishment was hiring Chantel. You know, boards don't always get an opportunity to do that. So that was nice to see that. You've done a lot with your parks. You've maintained a strong financial position. So these are things to really be proud of. So you want to think about, what do you want to have on this major accomplishments list in the next 3, 4, 5 years? And these were the major things from the commissioners that really came out. Some of your concerns as well as priorities. Public schools, I mean, that's such a big responsibility for every county in the state. Making sure you have a safe community. Making sure you continue to see some of that growth in the tax base. The growth in the tax base allows you to be fiscally responsible and keep the tax rates at a reasonable level. Concerns about health disparities, and how do you address some of those charts that Amy just shared with food insecurity and those populations that might be struggling. And then when you look at the county operations side of the house, there was lots of questions or issues around employee recruitment and retention, because those are the people who are delivering the services to your residents, the front line, and if you don't have those, you can't achieve your objectives. So we asked, when we were doing the interviews and had the survey put together, we really had asked questions in these major focus areas: economic development, public safety, human services, education, operations. And then we discovered, as we were doing another county, Amy and I believe in continuous improvement. We learned an area that we probably didn't and that's really your active and vibrant living, your parks, your libraries, your arts and cultural. So we've got that here, and if we might just want to try and get some thoughts from you today. Some of that came out in your priorities, actually. Many of you mentioned parks, which we would definitely put in this area. But we're going to tackle these focus areas one at a time, and we're going to start with economic development. Now, kind of orient you to this slide. You're going to see this slide at the beginning of each focus area. On the left, we have those things that the county is directly responsible for. You make those decisions. In many cases, you provide the funding. And so here we've got the airport, your utilities commission, and then you have your own community and economic development department. Not all counties have that. Many counties partner through their chambers or other local alliances. But there you have your partners, Greater Winston-Salem, Visit Winston-Salem, all of your municipalities, Goodwill, Forsyth Tech, and the schools. Those are all important components. And then the other thing we want to identify is sometimes you don't need to recreate the wheel or start from scratch. You have a lot of existing plans or initiatives that you've already endorsed, embraced, and are working on moving forward. But are there some things in some of these plans that you want to elevate to a higher level to be part of your board goals and a higher level of priorities? Kind of lift them out of those existing plans and give them a little bit higher visibility. Is there anything on this slide that you think we might have missed? This is where staff was incredibly helpful.
Our disclaimer is, we're sure we probably are missing stuff, because there's a lot of things happening, but we wanted to at least capture kind of the core essence of partners and plans and initiatives.
And we may flip back and forth between all of these slides. So then when we move on to your challenges, and we're gonna address, the first slide will be the challenges that you identified. The second slide will, where you had some of your desired outcomes, because we asked you that question. Challenges are just the fact that you've got to put a new zoning plan in place, and I guess is that Legacy 2030, when was that put in place?
2012.
Okay. So now you're trying to go another decade and a half and move to 2045. And there lots changed in the world since 2012. So that's probably going to be an important update for you all. And then balancing growth with infrastructure needs and resource demands. That's always the challenge. And how do you get growth that helps, that more than pays for itself in some cases? That whole balance of residential and commercial. And I'm sure with you all moving in to revaluation, you'll be getting a lot of information on that soon about what does that makeup of your tax base look like. Then here were some of the desired outcomes that you all identified. Everything from focusing on business park development to managing rapid urbanization. You identified some ways to enhance, you mentioned enhancing collaboration with Greater Winston-Salem, increasing MWBE and HUB participation in your county contracts, collaborating with municipalities, recruitment of clean energy and health services, and promoting workforce initiatives for younger students. And I think one of it, and maybe not students, but also more of that late 30s, early 40s. I think one of the things that Amy and I were surprised about was your median age. I mean, that's a relatively low median age for a mature county and one of the larger counties. But that gives you a lot of potential because you've got a good pool for your workforce to fuel your economic development efforts. So then here we get to the discussion of vision in the next year, the next 5 years. And really kind of you focusing on the what you want to accomplish. And then staff's challenge is gonna be helping make sure they have good strategies, for the what. For the how, I'm sorry, for the how. And I can definitely flip back to this slide. And this were, one of the questions we also asked you prior to the session was what were some of your priorities? So for each, oops, I'm going the wrong way. Nope, now, still going the wrong way. Go back. Oops. Oh, there we go. I need to hit the right button, I'm sorry. Wow, I went way back. There we go. So we had, you had desired outcomes, and then there were some priorities that rose up. So we can move back and forth between these slides. So these were some of the priorities that came out from the, from your feedback. So what are your thoughts on kind of what came out of your input?
I think it's a couple of slides back, in regard to land use, planning, you hit on it a little bit, but I don't remember where on the slides that it is, but that is, I'm not gonna say that is the most important thing that we're, facing, but it is a big important, thing, and one of the things we've been seeing off and on, it seems like it's been on more, not just right recently, for maybe just a few years, 2, 3, maybe 5. There's just, and this gets into detail where the planning will need to work on it, and I think they've been doing a good job all the time. But we're seeing more conflict with residential and commercial development. That's I don't see that stopping, because maybe you can, I think, mitigate was one of the words that may have been used, and the only way I know how to help with that is they're already doing it. The places that you can put the commercial in the places that more residential needs to be, but what we're seeing, one just recently, but I've been observing for a long time. You got commercial development gets in place, some of it's been there for a long time, and then there's some more open area. Well, here comes the development coming up to it, and then that's where the conflict is. If some more changes begin to come in this commercial area, your residential area don't care much about that. And I found it, I used to think I was the only one, or one of the ones that just didn't like much change, and I found out there's a whole lot of people don't like change any better than I do. So that's just one. And I believe, Amy, something a while ago you mentioned that earlier in your presentation about the rural area was not.
They had declined.
Well, they must not check over in my area. That's all I can say. Because they missed something, I believe. Okay.
You've maintained your area.
Well, I just got a little spot that I'm trying to maintain.
But to follow up on that chart, it needs to indicate when annexation became against the law. That and I don't know what year that was, but it was 2000,
Around 2010.
2008, 2009, somewhere. That was a point at which it needed to be looked, because that's when the annexation, the increased municipality numbers had to do with nothing but people annexing everything they could see. And when that stopped, I noticed, I'm sort of guessing from that chart, we look pretty stable and maybe, grew a little something quite as bad. But and that's what we are facing as we're transitioning into more. The unincorporated areas are becoming more urban. Then a lot of our ordinances are not consistent with the city's got a whole set of rules. We don't have as many rules. And now people that move into these areas who used to live in the city, a lot of them, they're moving out and they want the same rules. They think the same rules apply. They think it doesn't matter what it is.
Same rules and same services, and we
Yes.
have traditionally not provided the same level of either in the unincorporated areas. So
And that's a real dilemma, that piece. And some state statutes that have changed have created exactly the major problems that Commissioner Linville's talking about with these neighborhoods when you can have 100 homes and one entry and exit, and you don't even think about whether that one entry and exit is into another neighborhood that has a one entry and exit, and all of a sudden that's okay. Well, that's not okay. And I think, that's an issue that if we have the latitude, we have the authority as a commission working with our plan and zoning to begin to address some of that, we need to do it. And I think that's exactly what I've heard Commissioner Linville talk about. So that's kind of influencing, it requires the investigation of what we can do. And then we need to be kind of making some rules to get at that. I mean, traffic is a big issue, and DOT, the requirement, who's gonna fix the roads? So is it gonna be a developer trying to fix it, and they can't afford it, and then they try to bully through whatever it is, and then DOT is working with their resources and doing the best they can, and there's no marriage there, and that creates these huge clashes of folks that they don't want to wait another 5 minutes to get on in their intersection, in their neighborhood.
And how is your water and sewer in the unincorporated area, or is that
Well,
still
the
mainly?
good thing is that we have a joint city-county water utility.
Okay.
But it's not been driven by being proactive. It's driven by keeping what you got. And by keeping what we have a very cheap water and sewer compared. If you had the water and sewer rates comparing, which we have seen in a recent water sewer meeting, you'd see that we're really low. Well, part of that's because we have no water. When we talk about having business parks, you gotta have water and sewer, and that does not happen overnight. And so as a result, we have virtually no open building sites for people to have, to put a small plant. And we're in an area next to, now with Toyota, Boom, and VinFast, and all these places, we could be subsidiaries of small manufacturing, 100, 200, people, 250,000, square foot plants. We have no place to put them. And that is a real problem because there's not been thinking about that in keeping what we have maintained. And it's our water sewer is great. Have a good source, good supply, but you don't get them where you need them now, and we're in a rock and hard place on that.
Is that something that's on the radar for?
Oh yeah, it's on the radar.
Economic development folks?
Yeah, it is. Oh yeah, it's on the radar.
We have a site study in the works to try to identify where we could possibly grow, where there needs to be infrastructure to then bring back to the board, and we should get that in the springtime.
Excellent.
And the problem for Forsyth County is it has a relatively large population in a relatively small land area compared to the other major urban counties in the state. And that means that wherever something is proposed, it's going to run into conflicts. It's either going to run into conflicts with residential, with agriculture, open space, more likely all of the above, any given site. So there are things, we do not have the capacity for a mega park, for example. We just don't have any place to put it. But we want our share of the economic development in a way that doesn't, run us out of every other land use we need.
Exactly. Because we're trying to do about 20 minutes per focus area. So anything else? I will mention that one of the things that came out from many of you was just the whole issue of affordable housing. Are there anything there that you want to highlight or discuss?
Well, I think exploring, the city has talked about, I don't know what level they're in fact, Dan may know, but that it is having some kind of fund that they're trying to create that would be one that would provide, it would be managed by some kind of, board that would allow, grants to help, incentivize the construction of private affordable housing options. And, that's the kind of thing that I think we ought to look at it as we could do some one-time kind of contributions, not an annual kind of thing, but to help establish such a thing. The other part of it is really, there's so many people who've studied that issue and throw around numbers that get thrown around repeatedly. And I actually have one of those, and I haven't studied it carefully enough, but I did get it. To what is, I think we all understand there's a pretty good definition of affordable housing, but the numbers, what the numbers are for all that is a little more elusive, and how not some of those numbers pop up. Like we need 20,000 more affordable housing. Well, or is it 12,500, or what is it? What is it? What was it last year? What is it next year?
I can give an update. So the city partnered with Winston-Salem Foundation, I've been part of the group and looking at that fund and what it could be used for. And so I think the Winston-Salem Foundation has made a lot of progress on that. Probably some announcements soon as far as that, but it would be a fund that would be housed in the Winston-Salem Foundation outside of the city of Winston-Salem that would have contributions by them.
I would just like to first say good morning. Sorry for being a little tardy. Thank you all so much for hosting, I think, this very impactful kind of gathering of the commissioners to help us have a focused priorities that then can align with, budget and dollars to support these priorities. But I do want to say two things as it relates to affordable housing, especially since the need aggressively is obviously inside of the county through, the main municipality of Winston-Salem, that I think there has to be more intentionality in working with the city. So the county definitely taking the support role, but being very intentional about supporting where the city is going to try to offset some of the affordable housing needs. I think that it is very clear that the city is going to have to take the lead, and I see that they are doing specific things like selling lots for $1 to groups in the community to try to get more housing out and available for our citizens. I think also, and I applaud Cal and his team for being very intentional about technically what can the county do, because I think, including myself, I want the county to do so much more than it is just designed to do. And I think the more we're educated about what the county does as it relates to affordable housing, and then where there are some maybe potential acts that we could, assist with the city, kind of help create a more seamless relationship between citizens and their expectation of what we can and can't do.
Exactly.
The city's probably gonna do a bond issue too, as a contributor for the fund that would be housed at Winston-Salem Foundation. One thing I'd like to throw in the mix that we've seen is Forsyth County has done a good job of administering CDBG funds that come in for housing renovation. And one possible avenue for the county's participation would be to play to that strength and look for revenue that could be fed into that process and boost the number of units that you provide rehab. Because there's a lot of housing that has decayed, but not to the point of needing demolition yet. And there are causes for that are beyond our control, but there are opportunities to either acquire and rehab, or to work particularly with owner occupants, I think, to the extent that the law allows us to distinguish. I know that there are limits on that.
Yeah, and often that can be a goal, is to retain housing units.
Yes.
So that they don't get demolished and turned into something else.
And maybe the rules of this Winston-Salem Foundation Fund could include that kind of thing.
Yeah, and that's
Sort
where,
of rehab.
when I was in Wake, the county chose to take a very aggressive position in housing. So it was, Raleigh was working on Raleigh, and the county really partnered with the other 10 municipalities, and actually, Wake put in a penny for housing, but it was focused on retaining units, grants and loans for developing, so it was not that the county was in the business of doing the developing, but created a revolving loan fund, actually. So, it's really depending on the nature of your community, who it makes sense to take the lead, and then what are the specific avenues that you want to work on improving. Well, that was a great discussion on economic development. So if you don't mind, we're going to move on into public safety, which I know was issue for many of you. And goodness, when you look at existing plans and your partners, there's quite a long list here. But with counties, you've got the direct responsibilities, for the sheriff's office, funding emergency management, fire marshal, and EMS. And then numerous partners. You've got your police departments, you've got schools, you've got the court system. So everybody seems to have have a piece of the public safety pie. But you've got some significant existing plans or initiatives underway. I think every county has had to develop the opioid strategic plan to maintain those funds. We've got North Carolina DHS MOA that tells you how your human services have to deal with that. There's a fire study underway, because I know that issue came up quite frequently about fire service in the unincorporated area. So here were your challenges. Continued vacant positions. Every county in the state is struggling with that. Reduction in violent crimes and drug trafficking, and competitive wages. Then here were some of your desired outcomes. Several mentioned the fire services plan and developing a sustainable model there. Continuing recruitment and retention of EMS. I would probably also hazard to guess that's an issue with the sheriff's office as well. And really kind of what do you have to do to continue to maintain employees in the public safety realm, as well as attracting new ones. So again, what are some of those key achievements that you want to achieve? And these were some of the priorities that came out from your input. Back to the volunteer fire departments, achieving tax equity, stable and adequate staffing, and then the relationship with the sheriff.
I'm just not sure what that means. I mean, I've never seen the sheriff come before us that 9 times out of 10, he didn't get what he wanted.
Okay.
And I'm like, what are we supposed to do?
I'm not sure, that was just someone listed the priority, that would have been a question I would have, was gonna ask, you know, where are the areas, that may need, some enhancement there with the sheriff? But how do these priorities feel in terms of public safety? Except for maybe defining better if there is a need to strengthen relationship with the sheriff.
Yeah, I would need a better definition of that.
Okay.
And I think in the maintain stable and adequate staffing levels for EMS, I really think we need to look at a more strategic location of our ambulances and the kind of measurement of response times and those kind of issues. Yeah, that's a real complicated area, but our current facility for that's the biggest one, the central location of it, not far from here, because of changes to Highway 52 and road and traffic patterns, it's a lot harder for them to get in and out. And that's for almost every single ambulance that goes out. There's a detriment to that. Plus, that facility, having been over there a couple times in the last few months, and it's a little tough. I mean, it's kind of rising to the level. We've done a lot of good work in facilities, as you all, in fact, everybody identified earlier. I think that's one we need to be doing some looking at. That may not even need to be there. It may need to be farmed out at regional locations and change some other kind of. I mean, that whole area needs some attention by people more capable than we are. The how needs to be done by somebody else, but I think that's a problem.
And does your EMS system plan, I'm not familiar with it, does that address those challenges, or is it really something where there needs to be more of that longer term look on where the growth is, where you need to place the facilities? I know it's not uncommon when transportation takes over that you're relocating facilities in many cases.
The EMS, they've got them staged at different places, and some I mentioned some volunteer fire stations. There's one in Kernersville. They're spaced all around, and they got a system. And I can't tell you how it works. They know where the call volumes are, and try to. Well, they got units there. I think the EMS system that we have is a good system. Probably, in my opinion, the only thing, or one of the things that's caused difficulty is being able to keep some personnel, because the next county or the next county or somewhere else is found the same problem, and they pay more. That's the staffing having difficulty with that. But as far as the program itself, I think it's one of the top in the state. That's what several other counties would say. Some would say they're the best. I say we're one of in the top tier.
Now, do you have units at your fire stations currently?
Apparently some, right?
We do have at some locations, yes.
Because I know Wake went through a pretty strategic EMS plan a few years ago, and one of our big moves was whenever there was a new fire station going up, we made sure there was at least room, one bay, and we did cost shares on those facilities. Because it was much less expensive to cost share on a fire station and build that into the design than build a lot of standalone stations, especially in a county where there are traffic issues, to where sometimes, having central locations doesn't always work as effectively.
Well, I would comment about the fire as well as the EMS. I've been one of the ones, Mr. Chairman too, and others have been involved from our board from time to time on the fire study, I would call, in my opinion, kind of what we're doing is modification. The unincorporated area is originated from all volunteers. We've got some paid people now, but the system is a very good system. We got the northeast area of the county is less populated, and it's two, probably maybe three, that their financial situation is not good, and therefore it's not any fault of their own. It's just the way the tax base is there and the way it's taxed, and so we're overall. It's good. Even those areas, they're doing good with what they've got. So the equity part of it is a part of it. That's not all of it.
Just write down the word technology for public safety. That drone surveillance, cameras, star chase, shot spotter, which I understand we no longer have in the county.
And back to the question of where you locate the EMS units. If we've got a functional co-location system for pre-staging, it might just be a matter of tweaking that. One factor I know in the city is that several years ago the city began sending out fire units in response to 911 medical emergencies as well. It's had to refine that somewhat since then. Still happens, but the 911 system has to distinguish the kind of emergency in terms of whether or not to send fire units.
And we do have staff actually working with map precise Shaylee right now. They're kind of mapping out where the current EMS stations are, if they are co-located in fire, what's the response time. So there's some work being done with that that we will continue to lift up since it does appear that is a priority.
And I would just like to, I was thinking through what Vice Chair Wisenhunt's question about strengthening the relationship with the sheriff, and I guess maybe how I would respond to that is not so much of what the commissioners approved to provide for him, but I would just put on the table, I think that the county manager is very good at being intentional about doing things with the sheriff's office to make sure we have concerted meetings with his team, just to make sure that there are strong lines of communication between what he expects and what we can obviously deliver and those kinds of things. And I think for me, since I've been on the commission, when those communication lines are better, there is less agitation. So that's maybe how I would explain that. Just keeping the lines of communication. Yeah.
And on my end, I meet with the sheriff on a monthly basis, and that has never happened. He will tell you that has never happened. So we have a recurring meeting with him. He sometimes brings his entourage with him. So I sometimes have to bring back up for myself. But it has been, I feel like it's allowed kind of more of proactive communication, so I know like what's going on, or if there's something that he wants to do, we can have conversations about like, you can't do it this way, but maybe here's how you can do it, as opposed to having more of an adversarial relationship. So we're working on it.
Anything
And an underlying issue in all of these areas is what are the things that you can measure that actually show success. Commissioner Linville mentioned a few minutes ago about our EMS that would be sort of one of the best in the state. Well, what is the metric that shows we are one of the best in the state, and what are everybody else doing? This is something I think ECACC could work on, which is a benchmarking tool. And it could be, you've got the map book that's online and so forth that shares a lot of statistics, about facts about counties, but it doesn't describe the kind of real measures of success in some kind of benchmarking kind of way. And even if we could just get the 5 urban areas, and I think the 5 urban areas have enough staff to actually think about that and what do they track?
Yeah.
What are everybody trying? I'm sure Wake's got enough staff to do lots, and they probably do. I'd like to know how do they measure their success? How do you measure your success in law enforcement?
Right.
How do you measure your success in EMS?
Yeah. And it's interesting, as we were developing this presentation, we realized that a gaping hole in the map book is there's nothing on public safety. And that is a core responsibility of every county. So I've sent Denise Canada a little note that said, we really need to probably look at getting some public safety information in that map book. Because when you look at the big 4 that counties have to do, public safety, education, economic development, and human services, that one's clearly missing.
In the winter work session, you'll have a brief overview of the work we are doing on performance measures and benchmarks. And Shaylee Bowen, our fantastic GIO, is leading that effort with budget. So we just kind of give you a sneak peek to make sure this is the direction you want us to go.
That was great input on public safety. Anything else before we move on to the next
Well,
category?
the other thing, the next thing maybe, do we need to take a break?
Okay.
Might be the next thing.
Happy to do that. We've been going about an hour and 15 minutes. So
That's good.
your
I think we're
pleasure,
pretty
Jim.
much on schedule for Amy,
Okay.
for 12:30.
All right.
All right. We'll take 5. Take a 5.
behavioral health as well, and Bridges to Home Family Justice Center. We built in with the help of staff. You had many partners at different levels. You can see state and federal agencies. The school system is a partner as well. Healthcare providers, your LME managed care, nonprofit organizations, and the Reentry Council. Now, as far as the plans, there's lots of plans, which is a good thing. It means you have some data to help you build the need to build your goals. So these are all of your existing plans. I am not going to read all of these, but you have them in your presentation. But there's a lot of information here that can help you from a human services perspective. Your input helped us with the challenges, and you listed about reducing drug use, but also supporting recovery programs in that vein. Again, listed for human services was continued recruitment and retention challenges, and competitive salaries. Some of the desired outcome, again, we've heard about tracking progress, and specifically it was mentioned tracking progress in the areas of poverty and health disparities. The need to focus on infant mortality and the Medicaid population. Another desired outcome, expand harm reduction programs like the Narcan distribution. Offer, again, competitive salaries to attract staff. Address health disparities by improving access to health care, preventive services, and mental health resources as well. Provide senior care services to address affordable housing and access to health care for the aging population. And then expand access to those essential social services and address homelessness, food insecurity, and employment assistance. So a lot of desired outcomes here. So again, commissioners focus on what areas do you want to focus on, and then staff will come up with the how. So based on your priorities, we identified 6 major areas: expanding access to health care, enhance emergency response for public health crisis, support for the vulnerable populations, and specifically addressing, again, those key areas mentioned in the survey: homelessness, food insecurity, and the economic instability. Reduce health disparities, developing strategies to meet the needs, again, of the aging population. And then finally, improving the coordination in our social services system for a seamless system, including public health. So you kind of have some overlap there, but maybe bringing in communication and better understanding. So let me stop here. That's a lot of information. You've provided a lot of good feedback in the area of human services. A lot of needs, but you put some priorities out there. How does this feel to you?
So for me, I probably wrote a dissertation around human services on this, and thank you for allowing me to share my thoughts. I remember Chantel sharing with us during the pandemic that we wanted to work ourselves out of not of a job, but just work ourselves out. Mm-hmm. And for me, moving in this next phase as a commissioner, human services is really important to me. It's important because we will reduce the need for public safety. We will reduce the need for our public education and the existing problems that they're having. So I would love for us to really focus on these priorities in this coming year more than we have ever before, again, because we know that if we address these issues in our communities are better. And that's what we just want to continue to move Forsyth forward. So thank you for allowing me to share that. It was a lot to read, I'm sure.
That's okay. That's what we're here for. This builds the foundation to build those priorities and the goals.
question about expanding access to healthcare. Maybe Chantel or someone on staff can help me to understand what would we do as a county to expand access to citizens for the healthcare that the county provides?
So if I'm being honest, I don't 100% know what this means or the expectation is, because on the public health side, we don't do primary care. We
Okay.
rely on our partners, you know, with the hospital systems and others. But we do have like STI clinic and family planning and communicable disease and TB and Denise, you can stop help me. But you know, but certainly we can work with our partners if there are other places in which it needs to be. So that's what I would assume. I don't 100% otherwise know what it means. Denise, I don't know if you have any
Yeah, I
thoughts.
wondered when I read it if it meant helping our community to eliminate the barriers to access.
Mhm.
That's initially where I went with it. Or is it
So would a barrier be
expanding out-
transportation?
could be, or is it expanding more outside of our traditional modes of where we deliver services, getting outside of our building, going more into the communities? I don't know, there's lots of ways this could be subdivided into to more targeted goals, but we definitely need some direction in that.
Yeah, because when I think about expanding access to health care in a, I would say a very creative way, but I think you're going to have to then consider putting staff at harm's risk, trying to meet the homelessness where they are. But there are a lot of other factors, as you well know, around mental health that creates challenge safety issues if our staff are trying to go out and meet them where they are to help with, you know, some physical health needs, if you will. So
we go out in the community all the time. Like, we're providing services and resources. We're in Crystal Tower, we're in Bimonthly, we're in Sunrise. Like, there's no place we are not, but we also do, again, we don't do primary care, but we do, a lot of times if we have like an event, we will invite Novant's Cruiser to come or Atrium's mobile clinic. So we do all, you know, try to work together in that regard, but we don't have like a kind of standard thing. There's also kind of a clinic that goes to Cynthia Terrace on a regular schedule.
Some of our shelters have routine physical health care available on site. Now, that does not necessarily address individuals who aren't coming into the shelter setting. Citywood Dwellings is adding as well. So there's some efforts in the community. We just need to be really careful not to be redundant with that momentum that's already going, but maybe enhance that momentum or support that momentum.
I didn't phrase my comments on healthcare in terms of expanding access, because I was thinking more of maintaining the enhanced expansion and maintaining effort through, for example, DSS and the health department to educate people on what's available for them.
The Medicaid expansion.
Medicaid expansion,
That's
for
what I
example.
was thinking this might be,
And they
is
do.
that's new and somewhat complicated, so enhancing people's awareness of their healthcare options.
Yeah, and I think the numbers would support what Vice Chair Quisnet just said. We're doing that. I think it's important that we maintain that effort, because there are some headwinds that we're running into on the national level potentially to trim that back, and we can't afford to. That would have an enormous adverse impact on our populations in need here lately.
Denise, perhaps when you send out the update to the HHS board, maybe you could send it to all the commissions. Maybe they don't
That's
quite
probably a great
realize
idea.
exactly what is going on in health and human services.
Because in the same way I send you all a weekly update, Denise sends one to the HHS
Exactly.
board. I did when I was, and it's sometimes a tad bit different. It just, yeah.
But that'd be great.
my mind, I was just thinking about the coordination of care, and it sounds like Chantel shared, some of what that looks like. We just don't get to see any of it, I know that a lot of things are going on. And I remember one time, when we got one of the desired outcomes about the infant mortality regarding the Medicaid participation. They used to send families a letter to say it's time for your child to get an annual exam from Medicaid. It's already paid for. But what does that actually look like? Again, that's just a question. I don't know what goes on behind the scenes, but are they getting that letter to say you need to schedule with a primary care, or versus here's some options for you? What does that
So
look
some
like?
of the access could be just communication and making sure citizens
No.
have the
What's
information
available.
they need. Yes.
And you could go, probably as a million different ways with this. Is it access to culturally appropriate camp, right?
Yeah, that's
If you
true.
speak a different language, do you want services from someone who speaks the language that you're comfortable speaking? There's a lot of ways.
We have a new healthy manager, so I'm excited about the work that she's about to do, so, yeah. All right, I'm done. Thank you.
What about any discussion about emergency response for public health crisis?
I think there's been, from my recollection, concern about decreasing the response time, and there is a direct impact on citizens. And I know that we've all received emails about family members being concerned about the time it takes for their family members to get attention from EMS. So I think that, and someone can, add on, but from my recollection, it's about the issue that we have with vacancies and just not having the manpower.
It kind of goes back to the prior discussion about strategically placing ambulances and medical personnel in response and that coordination. Okay.
I think it would be, for me, helpful if I knew hiring 2 more, for example, EMS would help with the emergency response time. And so then I'm more likely to make sure that, okay, I think our budget priority should reflect that need if we're trying to really decrease that response time as a priority.
Probably need a review on the vacancy rate and that type of thing to see what your average vacancy rate is.
And we have a lot of that data, and we'll make sure we share that again. I mean, I think if we improved our vacancy rate, which is getting better, I mean, it's better than it was, that will certainly help. I also think part of it too is we need to continue to educate the public on when it's appropriate to call 911. Because there are a lot of times that they are spending their time on calls that's really not appropriate for 911. And so it's also bogging down the system, and I know the hospitals also recently, got together to do like a public announcement. We don't want to deter people from calling 911 when they need to, but there's also an appropriate use of that. So it's a lot of things, but we'll make sure that you all have the appropriate data to make the best decisions.
What about this priority, talking about the vulnerable population, specifically homelessness, food insecurity, and economic instability?
I think that for me is just gonna fall right into the vacancies that we have. We need to have more people on the ground addressing these issues, and that's some of the things that I've seen over the years since I've been here. But what was alarming to me is to see that we still continue to have a few food insecurity, although we have all these programs that I see that we still have a problem.
It kind of probably falls in line with reducing health disparities, because those kind of go hand in hand as well.
I think we need to see how that bucket or that square,
This
yeah, the
one.
one we're speaking of
Yes,
now,
ma'am.
sort of, connects to our young citizens, because when especially school age, I think those going to be where there is that much more impact and consequential effect that is then also increasing the need on the public school side to need more resources. And so we're kind of paying for it 2 and 3 times because we're not maybe coming together with a comprehensive plan to deal with it. Because at one time we were paying for nurses through the county and for the school district. That's just an example.
Right. I was gonna say there should be some data from public health, based on the nurses in the school and through the
Yeah,
school system.
absolutely. And, you know, when I look at that bucket, to me, that really speaks to, there are some things that the county is responsible for, absolutely, that we need to be doing and supporting, but there's also a lot of nonprofit organizations
Yeah.
that help with this, and how do we do a better job collectively coming together to ensure we're holistically serving the population and in a more seamless way.
And that may be timely, because if you remember the slide, your food insecurity, those numbers had risen, and your human service numbers, so the timing may be right, not only here, but in all counties, to really work with your partners.
A couple of points. I think I believe the school system should have more comprehensive data on student population in need. And the other would be to the point of coordinating with nonprofits. One of the things that we could do would be more strategic in our community grants on poverty-focused areas such as food insecurity.
If that's the way the board wants to look at it, now's the time, that's timely, as budget is working, Chantel and staff are working on the budget.
And I would just like to extend my support for what Commissioner Bessie is saying, that with these priorities, it could really support the community grant effort, so that it doesn't seem so disconnected and we're going in 10 different directions. I think if everything aligns to what we're doing right now with setting priorities as, you know, a county and commissioners, then it makes sense then that the community could apply for the grants to help us with this focus for the next 3 or 5 years.
Much like the ARPA funding, if you reached out to nonprofits specifically in that area and seeking specific targeted outcomes. What about we haven't talked about the aging population per se. Any thoughts about strategies or needs in that area before we move on?
You do have the social contact disparities, and in many cases, the food insecurity issues that are addressed by things like the Meals on Wheels program. The county has been a major supporter of that effort, again, in part through the community grants process. I argue for maintaining effort in that area, but there's a lot of competition for those grants.
And then finally, anything else on coordination of social services for a seamless system? Any thoughts or more specific information about that for staff?
And we just need to do a lot more recruitment and hiring.
Okay, if there's nothing else, we'll move into education. Right, so you can see, from a public school perspective, the county is responsible for local current expense funding and also facilities. Libraries fall under education as well, the Forsyth County Libraries, and facilities also for the community college. You have lots of partners here in that process. We even included private and home schools, other public schools, Friends of the Library, nonprofits, also that support the library. You have some existing plans that may assist you in identifying your priorities. So here are your challenges. There, in your feedback, there were several commissioners that talked about developing, considering a funding formula. A commissioner mentioned the ongoing challenge of managing the ARP funding, making sure those funds were spent timely, efficiently, and appropriately according to those massive, massive guidelines. We had a commissioner under the area of education from a facility perspective talk about instances, thank goodness not in Forsyth County, but other areas, but to add screening in the school system, cameras, and drones. And then specifically, a commissioner mentioned an elementary school, and also looking at other needs, school district needs from a facility perspective. Here are the desired outcomes, a lot of good feedback. Commissioner mentioned that we need to support the highest teacher supplemental pay in North Carolina for 1 year. And if you remember, your supplement funding your supplements have gone up 90%. Develop a plan for your 2028 planned bond issue, but also to consider other financing options for facility needs. That's kind of a continuous process. Seek approval of a funding formula, again, that's come up again. Address facility disparities for schools that you're serving in the lower income areas. Are there some disparities from a facility or instructional perspective? Better understanding of county responsibilities, both for public schools and community college. And that's really a common theme that you hear, and John and I hear as we work with other counties. Commissioners get frustrated because citizens don't understand. People believe that the county is fully responsible for education and that you're in charge and can tell them what to do or how to spend their money. It doesn't work that way. And so, support education, campus security programs, specifically street school, do school, lift program at the community college level. Again, develop a funding formula and begin to strengthen that relationship. Specifically, I know that your manager is meeting regularly with the superintendent. I think that monthly. Yeah, I think that's ongoing, and that is a tremendous step in building and sustaining a healthy relationship, good working relationship with the school system. And then support the FTCC Trailblazer initiative. And then finally, sustain investment in schools while assuring accountability. So these are your desired outcomes. Your priorities. Those were your outcomes. Here are your priorities. And it really boiled down to 2 buckets. And that being improving education funding for the schools and the community college and the funding formula. So how do these feel? What are your thoughts about these priorities?
Feel good. Especially
Feels
about
good?
especially regarding the funding formula for the public schools.
Okay.
Had some conversations that we needed to have for a long time now, and the expectation is that we can all get on a better funding stream allocation for them?
A funding formula, and there are other communities that John and I are aware of that have some type of formula, and it's predictable. And the school system can know what to expect, and you know what you can afford and what you're gonna pay. It makes budgeting a little bit easier because, you know, the school system by statute doesn't have to give you a budget until May 15th, and that's really late to start planning for a significant request. Although, with a good relationship between the manager and the superintendent, you're gonna get an idea. But still, a funding formula helps with sustainability and predictability.
And I've already had lots of conversations with the school superintendent, and we've been meeting with her CFO and our budget director, and Jonna joined our last meeting. And so all of you know we've had a funding formula, but it's never been like formally adopted, and some years we've used it, some years we haven't. And so Jonna actually will be leading the discussion at the winter work session on some proposed options for you all to consider, see what your thoughts are, and then from there the superintendent would take it to her school board to see if they would be interested in the same. But she would love a funding formula just as much as we would love a funding formula.
But that's her school board.
Her board leadership, and she thinks that the majority of her school board would, but will they like what we're proposing? I don't know.
You know, get down to the dollars.
Yes.
So in all
That's
fairness,
where that goes.
yeah, so in all fairness to the school board, the superintendent, our new county manager, and even us, you know, communication is important. And when you hear funding formula, the first thing that you're gonna submit in your mind is, oh, we're going back, they're taking things away. And it's really not that. It's an opportunity for them to come to the table, tell us what their needs are, versus us going back, haggling, that's what I call it, back and forth during our budget season. So I'm hopeful and I'm glad to hear that you're having these conversations with our superintendent. As far as the school system is concerned, I pray that they're listening as well as I listen to their school board meetings and their needs as well. And I want to have a better relationship with them. There's some new folks that are on there. They don't understand, they don't know, and I'm still learning myself. So again, us communicating, if something doesn't feel right, sound right, you don't understand, there's resources, you know, there's institutional knowledge that you can galvanize, you know, in the decisions that we're making. So yeah.
For me, this is my top priority of everything we talk.
Real nothing.
So the funding formula addresses operational support.
That's correct.
We need to separately address a facility,
Capital site, yes.
a capital site. And in doing that, I see two related but distinct issue needs. There are the core educational facilities, and then there are support facilities like athletic facilities, playgrounds, etc. I think the school board is making a special effort to address disparities in the core facilities. The support facilities are disproportionately dependent on the community wealth of the area served. Without naming the schools, you know, you've got one high school that's adding a press box to its football stadium. One high school that's getting a new stadium, and one high school that doesn't even have a track that meets state competition standards. They cannot hold home meets. And if you have adolescents out there training on that hard surface track, you're hurting their knees. And I'm sure that, and in playground facilities, you know, I have heard from some of my colleagues in other elected positions, you know, it's kind of the heartbreaking kind of story, like a visit by their children to another elementary school for an activity, and kids asking, can we come back here and use their playground? So there's a lot that needs to be done, and there should be mechanisms that we can design to leverage our overall community wealth to assist with the needs of schools that are serving lower wealth communities, primarily considered lower wealth communities.
So inequity basically in facilities, not just the educational side, but also the support areas and sports and that type of thing.
But the school board needs to be able to articulate this. But Commissioner Bessie's right, Dan's right, they got those problems, but I think solving the inequity has to come with a suggested plan from them as a way to do it. And there's philosophies about those kind of things, particularly playgrounds, because they're used by communities and so forth and whatever else. And you could call them joint parks, you can share it. I mean, there's actually one school that actually shares right with a city community center, and there are some kind of site-specific things. But I just think the school board, it's incumbent upon them to address ways to at least articulate, define the inequities, and to come up with some kind of plan or whatever for it. And that in the past, I mean, if you looked at the history of bond issues, some bond issues have addressed the stadium issues, addressed the things, done those kind of things. And if you have if that's not a concern for them, I don't think it's our role to fix it. I mean, I want to probably more than anybody else, but I just think they've got to step up and deal with those issues and outline what those needs are, and we need a capital plan for now and for we sort of targeted a 28 bond issue. I actually wrote in one of my things, I think if there's a way to help them with something between now and 2028 with something, that could be a cash amount to do a thing or whatever, but we can't, we I think are paralyzed until it's a matter, and it's gotta be explainable, you know, it can't be random.
So it's my understanding from the school superintendent that they are actively working on a plan, that is one of their priorities, and we should hopefully see something in the near future, that their board is working through a plan.
Does that include a facility evaluation?
That is my understanding from her. And they are also working on prioritizing the list.
That's great. That's great. I mean, we have it, and we can have these kind of conversations. But because I mean, Dan's identified the issues, but how they get that part of that how has to go into an elected body with a responsibility.
And normally boards of commissioners usually don't take on the role of telling school systems which facilities to build, which ones to upgrade, that type of thing. You get a plan and you fund it based on an evaluation of facilities, short-term, long-term determination, and bond issues, pay-as-you-go, that kind of thing.
But it would be fair to say that we're inviting
That is
a plan.
we have.
Yes.
And I think
It's
that's the-
actually on if I would show you my monthly agenda for the school superintendent, their capital plan is on every single agenda.
Have you referenced the support facilities experience?
For her, in our conversations, it is part of their plan. They have a facilities assessment, like they're working through that as part of that plan.
And I think but them knowing that there's a willingness for you all to entertain that funding, I think is very important.
It's fair.
Because some school boards would not necessarily think that the commissioners would fund them. So I think setting that expectation, because their facilities are critical to community health. And I think setting the expectation that you expect them to be a partner at that, but they have to help come up with the details because they know their facilities.
And
I think, go ahead.
Just for me real quick, this communication is really important because again, community relations is important. I don't foresee us having too much of the problem is coming from the school board itself, but it's from the community that wants things for the school systems, and that's a fair place for them to be. Some of them have no idea what our roles and responsibilities are, so they expect us to go over there and tell the school board or tell the whomever what to do, and it just doesn't work like that. And then when they do come and ask, it's an ask. I mean, we try to navigate what we can within the budget that we have. So I'm hopeful that they will hear that and understand this is how it works. It's not, we tell them what to do, you're offering what we need to help you with, and we try to realize that in that way. Thank you.
I think that there's a reasonable expectation that their capital plan represents what their pillars of success are on that. And one of those things is about equity. There's a whole equity department. And I think that any one of us should expect to see in their capital plan, signs that every school has what every school has versus some have and some don't. So I think that for me, it is, holding them accountable to what they have invested in as it relates to all of our schools will pound for pound have the same things so that some schools don't appear to have what other schools don't.
You want to make sure that the students in all schools have the same opportunity for the same experience.
Yes.
But some of the schools have that because of parent involvement. Some of the schools, the parents themselves have raised the money, they've done the work for football stadiums and whatnot. So you're never going to have every school having the same thing because you have different parents who are involved in schools.
Exactly, which is why I argue for a compensatory mechanism, because schools disproportionately serve the lower wealth communities are going to have fewer parents who have the time or the money or the connections to raise enough money to provide quality basic facilities, much less the bells and whistles.
Well, and there are ways to do that. There are ways to do that. You can create a matching fund kind of issue where, for example, the school board could choose and within their budget, if you're doing a playground, we're going to match you $4 to $1. You got to do something. And then if you're at a certain level, you get no match. It's a way to provide incentives, and then you have to also define. This is the big difference of what is the basic playground, and you can't, in my opinion, you don't tell a school with a lot of wealthy parents that they can't do more than that. If they want to do more than that base, great, but everybody ought to have at least this a certain
Base
level. And I know the school district, I'm sure, still does this, is that they have, one of the big issues in that playground equipment is assembly. And the school district assembles all those things and actually meets the safety issues and all those kind of things. The assembly is a matter of simply buying the equipment. The school district standardizes the assembly and the safety features around it, walkways, appropriate cut rubber cushions, etc. You name it. There's lots of details, but the issue of the buying and the amount, there are different ways to do it. In fact, I can tell you in the past, there were pairs, there were sister school projects between high poverty and low poverty, and then they worked together in their sister school comparison. And they did things together as students, and they also helped each other on the wealthier school would help the poor school with projects. I mean, there are 100 million things to do, but all of them take work, and all of them take a plan. And you gotta do that. And I think we've encouraged it. We have talked a lot about the date for a bond issue, and that is looked at we tried to demonstrate our debt. We have a lot of debt rolling off in 28, and gives the capacity to have a lot of bonds with requiring no additional money to pay them off. Probably a minimum of $300 million, and maybe more, to pay them off available. And as a result, so we have actually tried to provide funds to help bridge. Well, part of, at no fault of anybody's, but cost overruns and others on previous bond issues have eaten up about $80 million that we basically, were able to come up and say, this is an $80 million bridge. This is not peanuts. It's an $80 million bridge, and that bridge is already gone. So, and there's still things out there. So if we could do, I think what the something is between now and 2028 is, because that is 3 years away, and a project could be probably worked on and identified in a certain way. And there has been precedent that this body has actually intervened in a single project and helped, make it happen in a different way. It's not like it can't be and hasn't been done. But we are not the drivers. I guess that's what I'm trying to get at. And I have to bite my tongue on that. These things.
My opening remarks were, you're very limited in your authority with telling the school board how to spend their operating funding and the capital funding. But the school board's very fortunate that you are offering a bond referendum. I mean, that should go a long way with the relationship. So what I'm hearing to wrap up education, manager and staff are working on the information. John is coming back at the winter work session with some options, more detailed, deeper dive into some comparison information. From the capital side, we're asking that the manager reiterate with the superintendent, facility evaluation, short-term, long-term plan, and bring that back to the board. Okay. Anything else? Did I summarize that appropriately, correctly? Okay. Right, we'll move into operations.
So coming down to the wire, have operations and active and vibrant living yet left? So the operations are really kind of all county departments, but this is particularly where kind of your internal service departments often feel left out because, they're not directly providing services, but you can't have a strong county government without strong administration, finance, general services, human resources, and information technology, because that is what makes all the other direct service delivery departments work. So we've identified this as an area of focus that really goes into how you're doing your service delivery. You've got lots of partners who also can guide you in how you're supposed to deliver these functions, statutory requirements. And then fortunately, you've got some really fundamental plans with your sound policies, both on the financial side as well as your personnel and administrative policies. Some of the challenges that you identified, some of this is on kind of the fiscal responsibility side, supporting revenue neutral tax rate during revaluation, limiting property tax increases. Someone mentioned additional relief for disabled veterans. Unfortunately, that can only be done that the state puts that into place. And again, the collaboration here with the city was mentioned on the affordable housing, which I think we did a good job of addressing earlier in economic development. Some of your desired outcomes, and we've performance measures has kind of woven it in its way to a lot of the discussion today, and I think that is your Your performance indicators are, how are you gonna measure success? When will you know that you've achieved the what? And Chantel mentioned that that's a priority for the organization and looking to really see how do you move that needle. But you've got to know where you are, where you want to go, and then the fund is developing the strategies on how to get there. The community grant funding discussion has come up, so I know that process is underway, but really how do you make that more impactful and effective? Continuing progress on competitive salaries. For hard to recruit positions, we've talked a lot today about recruitment and retention in many areas. And then ensuring fiscal responsibility and looping back up to the community grant process of making sure there's appropriate scrutiny of those nonprofit requests. So going back to what your priorities were, these were the main things that came out. Meaningful outcome measures, working on that performance measurement system, maintaining an adequate tax base and high quality county services, and continued progress on competitive salaries for those hard to recruit positions. And but also I think retention has also been a constant theme throughout. So has there anything missing on what we've identified on operations, and how do these priorities feel? Got a thumbs up from Commissioner Betsy, nod from Commissioner McDaniel. I think these are kind of the bread and butter. Any other thoughts on operations? Okay. Well, then let's touch on active and vibrant living, and we apologize that we didn't have a question focused on this to kind of fuel the discussion, but we hope some of these prompts with looking at your direct responsibilities, parks and recreation, the libraries, cooperative extension, and then you've got a great human resources program around employee health and well-being. I think that's part of the active and vibrant living. You've got multiple partners and fortunate to have, School of the Arts here. Gotta love your Master Gardeners with cooperative extension. Then your Callidium, you've got that new facility. And you've got a lot of great plans. You've got a comprehensive master plan for parks, a library strategic plan, NC Extension strategic plan for 2030, and then your community grants are underway on how can those really help enhance the quality of life. But when we ask you about some of your priorities, even though we didn't specifically ask about this area, these two things did come through in your comments. Retention of green areas, clean water with competing demands, and promoting inclusive community that prioritizes equity, sustainability, and quality of life. And that was really hit home in this last discussion. So a little forebear of this. But when you think about, we'll go back to this slide, the active and vibrant living, kind of looking at the things that you're responsible for or where you have strong partners, are there any things that kind of bubble up that might be goals, priorities, things that you want to make sure there's an emphasis on? I think this one kind of came out in that last discussion, but the inclusive community, equity, sustainability, and quality of life. But then exactly what does that look like? And that's where some of those performance measures could make a difference.
So since you asked, I will say that I appreciate the board's ability to open our minds during the ARPA funding session to provide a park for Highland Avenue. But I do believe that there's more to do to make that area more active and vibrant living for the folks that live in my district, in our county, but I support, I represent District A. So seeing that there is more work to do, and I'll be more specific by saying the Monarch building is vacant somewhat, and there's some work that we could do in terms of promoting some inclusivity and work that prioritizes the needs in that community. We can look at that. And then there's also some land that is available in that area that we could think through in terms of doing more work. So those are not a priority, but it's just something that I would love for us to just be thinking through. There's some extra sitting in the pot somewhere.
So, what I will say, Commissioner McDaniel, literally as we were talking about some of the other stuff, Denise chatted me, I'm seeing a vision for the old Monarch building emerging. So, as y'all were
I
talking.
think it's a great space to bring to life some of your priorities.
Yeah, so some of the
Yes.
priorities, and you all have already approved dollars to renovate that building, where we've been, trying to, we need to focus more this year on how to come up with a plan. We can't renovate until we know what we're gonna do with it, and so, certainly this is the time, and that is, so, yeah.
And we want to be comparable to the growing community. I mean, the church is there, there's some affordable housing that's being built there as well. So it's just a very beautiful, cohesive look in my opinion. So I'd just like to see that
Space for
community.
senior adult living.
Yes, let's go, Denise.
Lots of continuum in that
Yeah.
one.
I love it, yes. Okay.
I would just like to add, and maybe even reiterate some of what Commissioner McDaniel is speaking, maybe from a different lens, especially as it relates to the Lloyd Jordan Heritage Center / library. And if you know anything about the historical context of Winston-Salem, then you know that there is a multicultural perspective. And to see a multicultural heritage center / African American heritage center, a space in our community that uplifts the heritage of how this community was built. If you look at the 5 major counties across North Carolina, each one of them have, if you go to Guilford, there's a multicultural heritage space that helps that community. And of course, they have the Civil Rights Museum, which connects to, you know, their specific history. So I think that Forsyth County is a multicultural space, and the more we learn about one another, the more we can grow together. And so I would definitely love to see, we're talking about active and vibrant living, that our county think cooperatively with the community to what does those spaces look like to help us to learn about one another so that we can grow together better.
Thank you for that. Anything else in this area? I'm not quite sure how we've done it. We got through all the areas, so I think it's really all that incredible feedback that you gave us in advance that helped prime this discussion. So, in looking at, we're offering some proposed next steps. I think staff's been taking a lot of notes, Amy and I have taken a lot of notes to really compile your feedback and come back with a draft set of goals that then you could review, revise at an upcoming meeting, and then ultimately formally adopt them. So those are our proposed next steps, and you know, anything if we want to modify these, but certainly appreciate your engagement today and your engagement ahead of time, which I think helped us make this a very productive session. And Amy and I certainly enjoyed being a part of this and working with y'all again.
Thank you. I won't say thank you, but I would, just as in this next steps, I would suggest we use those 6 areas as goal areas. I mean, that kind of covers everything. So there would be goals, that maybe a staff-generated list in each of those areas, and maybe no more than 3. I don't know what people feel like, but I mean, if you really think about it, that's 15, that is 18 goals. That may even be too many. And it may be wanting to, they do a little thinking about, do we want to split this into high priority, whatever. I mean, maybe there's 2 tiers of goals, kind of high priority, lower priority, or short-term and long-term. I'm not so sure short-term and long. Maybe the higher priority and lower priority maybe is not to suggest that lower is terrible. It's just that it's front burner, top burner, back burner kind of issues.
And that's something that I would definitely suggest you know, really, because 18 goals is a lot. I'll tell you, the first time we did it in Wake County, we had 86.
I'm sure that was real helpful.
It took us multiple years to dwindle it down to a manageable number. But there was always a process of, once you have your goals, really looking at what are those highest priority, maybe in the next year, so that those are funneled into your resource allocation through the budget. But I would also, I definitely, our thinking, I did say that, Chair, but was to come back in these focus areas, because I do think it helps kind of, that's your bread and butter, those focus areas, and to then have goals that align, and then figure out how they also connect.
And I feel like we got enough feedback to probably give a draft of where we think, based on the discussions, the priorities are, and then we can do almost like we did with the legislative goals, get you all to rank them in that kind of way. So we'll come back and figure out a way. I really appreciate the engagement and the thoughtfulness. I know on the staff side, this has been really helpful. I see Denise and Kyle nodding as well, because we want to make sure whatever we're working on is what you all want us to be focused on. And so, and I think as we continue in the discussion, just for me to try to be a little bit more proactive and strategic, I appreciate the time, and I hope something like this will become part of our norm, as some other counties have done.
Well, that's good. Thank you again, Jonathan and Amy. You did a great job. Moved us right along, stayed on schedule, didn't have too much, just about right, kind of the Goldilocks. Just about right. Good.
Thank you so much.
And thanks staff for help them put it together. I didn't want to ignore
I
it.
mean, they did 99.9% of the work, so they're being gracious.